just catch you having fun.
Paving this shit crank.
If a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, that's the age-old philosophical thought experiment about perception and observation. But after this weekend, we can modify it this way. If a Trump march draws tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of peaceful, patriotic people to Washington, and no one's around to report it, did it really occur? Well, it was billed as the Million MAGA March. That's more than tens of thousands. And you look at it by the overhead shots, it could be one of the biggest grassroots protests the Capitol has ever seen. Attendees were families, young, old, black, white, Hispanic. They came from near and far, all to support the America First agenda and to stand with the man who has endured so much in order to lead the movement.
To support one of the best presidents, which is President Trump. We need Trump forever. For the very first time, I voted. And I voted for Donald J. Trump.
He's fought through thick and thin. He's been bombarded with one thing after another, you know, and the American people know it, you know, and you can see by the support.
We got to make sure our president get back in that office 4 more years.
Now, it's a fair guess that most in that gigantic crowd are convinced that Trump won the election. And it's likewise reasonable for them to conclude that they don't have much trust in the U.S. media. Now, pockets, by the way, were even chanting against this news channel for what they perceive as election night bias against the president. Others were rightfully outraged that few networks were even carrying the rally at all. And the ones who did were only interested in insulting the attendees.
The president's supporters, they've poured into the streets of Washington this weekend to try to give life to these unfounded and baseless claims of a rigged election. How did this become normal?
I think with some of these demonstrators, good luck getting a clear or fact-based, logical answer to some of the questions you're posing.
These people are fundamentally a joke. These aren't serious people. These are members of a cult. I hope they get frostbite.
I hope they get frostbite, is what he said. Now, remember, these talking heads are some of the kind, tolerant, unifying, and loving people that Biden and Harris claim make up their movement. Well, 73 million people voted for President Trump, and it's not too much for them to expect, is it, that the media treat them fairly and respectfully. Likewise, it's not too much for them to expect that only legal votes will be counted, and that their votes must not be nullified due to fraud. Now, for years now, I've been speaking about this type of honest, hardworking Americans who came to Washington over the weekend. And throughout this time, the so-called elites in our nation's capital have responded to the legitimate concerns of American citizens with mockery and contempt. It's dumbfounding to me that the media and Democrats still don't understand what a stupid strategy it is to alienate and dismiss all of these Americans. I think they're making the same mistake they made back in 2009 and 2010 when the much smaller Tea Party movement started.
You see the Tea Party movement as a real political force this year?
Look, it seems to be a very successful private enterprise.
Nobody actually knows what they're for. We just know what they are against.
It's not about taxes. This is about hating a black man in the White House.
We call it AstroTurf. It's not really a grassroots movement.
Those of you who are watching certain news channels that on which I'm not very popular, and you see folks waving tea bags around.
They thought that all that condescension would make the movement go away. But it only made the Tea Party stronger. Less than 2 years after those insults, Republicans took control of the House in 2010. Now, some of the Tea Party candidates included those little-known people, Kristi Noem, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Tim Scott, and Mike Lee. And 4 years later, the GOP took control of the Senate. 2 years after that, Donald Trump was elected president. Now, the difference between the Tea Party then and President Trump's movement now is that this movement now has a lot more clarity about what it wants. The same Trump economic and foreign policy agenda that led to higher wages, fewer wars. And whatever the final electoral college tally is in this election, this movement has a proven track record of success on everything from achieving our energy independence to challenging China to fast-tracking a COVID vaccine to raising family incomes. The results were so impressive that not only did President Trump broaden his coalition among working-class Americans, but he helped grow the party's numbers in the House. When all those vaunted media experts with all their credentials were predicting the opposite. They claimed Trump was going to shrink the party, remember that? Especially among minorities. Wrong again.
Blacks and Latinos are doing much better under Trump versus Obama. Yeah, absolutely.
Opportunity zones, which is something that, in my opinion, is the largest economic empowerment program for the black community since probably Reconstruction.
He's done a lot of things, and I've been seeing a lot of business come to my neighborhood. I've been seeing a lot of black people own homes.
Why couldn't the networks find these people to interview? They were there. We found them. In a Biden administration, that you just saw, all those gains, are going to be flushed down the toilet. His handlers, who are basically all the old Obama staffers, believe in something called the Great Reset of capitalism. I told you about this last week. It's a plan to force a more equitable distribution of global resources. Translation, most Americans will have less freedom and less money, except for the same elites who always find a way around the rules. Like during the lockdowns, when the families of these mini tyrants skirted the restrictions. Just last week, California Governor Gavin Newsom was dining with a prohibited number of pals at that exclusive restaurant, the French Laundry. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot was caught partying maskless in a massive crowd celebrating Biden's unofficial election win. No problem at all. And Pelosi, well, she was going to have a big congressional soiree until she was shamed into canceling it. The American people are onto these frauds. The MAGA marchers certainly couldn't have been clearer about what COVID lockdowns and restrictions have done to America.
It's like, and what Trump said in the beginning, the cure can't be worse than the disease itself. People, we still need to go on.
Trying to finish off any business that was able to hang on by the skin of their teeth, and the last closures, they'll finish them off.
People are hurting. Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, they all talk about caring about the American people, but you shut this country down for 4 to 6 weeks, and you're going to it'll be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of small businesses.
100% true. But so far, Joe Biden and his handlers aren't listening. Biden loves to talk about dignity and unity and respect. But the time for talk is over and the time for action is here. Because if Biden really wanted to unite the country, he wouldn't even be entertaining the idea of destroying our current economic recovery with another devastating lockdown or series of lockdowns. If Biden really wanted to unite the country, he would not dismiss the concerns of tens of millions of Americans about mail-in voting. Instead, he'd do something like, appoint a bipartisan commission to answer every question about how this election was conducted and to make certain that we will never have to wait so long for an accurate count. And if Joe Biden really wanted to unite the country, he would have personally and on camera condemned the BLM and Antifa thugs who beat, kicked, and harassed Trump supporters on Saturday. He has done none of these things. He still hopes this movement's just going to go away. But that's not going to happen. Here are a few hard truths for Joe Biden, his handlers, and his enablers in the press corps. You know who you are. The pro-Trump throngs didn't show up in D.C. on Saturday because of conservative media, because we told them to. They showed up knowing they could be physically attacked for doing so because they love America. And lying about them, insulting them, ignoring them will only incite more violence and more resentment and opposition. All Americans deserve to be heard, to be seen, and to be safe. It's the least a government can do for its citizens. And that's the angle.